was 14, I was asked to babysit my three younger cousins, aged 8, 4, and 1, in an extremely rural, mountainous part of Pennsylvania. My aunt and uncle had a wedding to go to, over an hour away, and wouldn't be back until very late. Their house was situated on a steep mountainside. Their back deck had a 15-foot drop onto a rocky hill below, leading down to a river. Their closest neighbors were about a half-mile away. The closest main road was a mile away, and at night, there were no lights to be seen anywhere around them. Basically, it was in the middle of nowhere, and you would have to know where you're going to get there. You don't just accidentally end up there. My aunt and uncle left us with some pizza and their cell phone number next to their landline. This was the early 2000s, and I didn't have a cell phone, but even if I did, I wouldn't get reception there anyway, and headed out. The baby was already asleep, but the 4-year-old wasn't feeling well and was quietly watching TV in the living room as he dozed off, and the 8-year-old was playing Guitar Hero with me up on the loft. The loft overlooked the living room to the left, where I could keep an eye on the 4-year-old, and there was a huge window that overlooked the driveway to the right. This description of the driveway is an important detail of the story. The road that led to their house ran straight into their forked driveway. It was a dead-end road. The house was as far as you could go. Go to the left driveway, there was a large open carport, and that's where my aunt and uncle and anyone who ever visited parked. The right driveway led down a very short but very steep hill to a large leveled out area and ended against the garage door that opened to the basement of the house. It was never used as a garage, but it served as my uncle's man cave and where he spent most of his time. Right beside the garage door, a normal door with a window so you could see right in. But this driveway was exclusively used by the kids as a play area because it was the only flat yard-like area on the property, and being on a mountainside, there isn't much room to safely play otherwise. No cars ever drove down there, ever. There are too many toys and bikes in the way, and friends and family knew this. It was about 10 p.m., pitch black outside. No moon to illuminate the area either. My cousin and I were still playing Guitar Hero when headlights caught the corner of my eye, and not my aunt's minivan. Headlights. Huge truck headlights with those roof lights you often see on Jeeps or other off-road trucks. Not only that, the truck was going down the right driveway, the kids' play area. This was not my aunt and uncle. This was not anyone they knew. Panic and dread filled my body. I was a small teenage girl, alone in an isolated house on a mountain at night with 3 children in my care. In a terrified voice, I asked my cousin, "Who is that? Jake, do you know whose truck that is?" And then he looked panicked. "No, I've never seen that truck before," he replied. I quickly ushered them downstairs, still unsure what to do, I checked on the baby and then grabbed the phone to call 911, and then I started to hear the metal garage door being shaken violently. No one ever opened that garage door. More panic fills me. I hear them try the door beside it, the metal doorknob jiggling. No one was actually knocking. It's not like they were checking to see if my uncle was down there. Plus, the lights were out. It was dark down there. They knew no one was down there. They were definitely breaking in. The door leading to the basement steps was right next to the phone, so I could clearly hear all of this going on. I quickly turned the little lock on the doorknob just in case they did make it into the basement. My heart was practically jumping out of my chest. I'm talking to the 911 dispatcher as my 8-year-old cousin clings to my arm. The operator is calm and trying to calm me, but I knew it would be at least 30 minutes until a police officer could get up there, assuming they didn't get totally lost on this mountainside in the pitch dark. I just kept thinking, we're fucked. We're dead. This is how I die. The operator asked for the number my aunt and uncle left me so she could have another dispatcher call them to let them know the situation. I turned around to grab the paper with the number on it, and to my absolute horror, I see a man peering in the large sliding glass door. A huge, burly, what had to have been a 6'4" man with long, scraggly red hair and a big, red, bushy beard. And what made it worse, he was grinning at me. Grinning in a way that still scares me to this day. Meanwhile, I had to have looked like a terrified deer in the headlights. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. There was a second man behind him I couldn't see as well. I have no idea what he looked like, but he was equally as tall, but a bit more lanky than the larger man at the sliding glass door. I screamed, "Oh God, they're here!" And before the 911 operator can say anything, my 8-year-old cousin goes, "Mr. Jim?" His voice was very confused. It wasn't like my cousin was happy or even relieved to see him. I asked, "You know who that is?" But before my cousin can answer, I turned my attention to the man in the door. "I'm on the phone with the police," I shouted. I'm grateful he didn't try that door, because I don't think it was locked. The man stared at me hard for a moment, eyebrows furrowed, like deciding what he wanted to do next. But then he just backed away into the darkness. What seemed like an eternity later, I saw the truck lights back out of the driveway and then back down the road until they disappeared. I was still scared shitless, and so was my cousin. He had only met that guy a few times, an acquaintance of his dad. It wasn't like it was a close family friend, and obviously because again he went down the wrong driveway. Visitors never go down that way. The 911 operator asked for a description of the man, then told me they'd gotten in touch with my aunt and uncle and they were on their way home. She stayed on the phone with me until a police officer showed up a bit later to make sure the men were gone, and they stayed with us until my aunt and uncle got home so they could ask them some questions. My uncle was furious, not for me calling them home early, but at this Mr. Jim guy. He muttered something like, "I'm going to fuck him up." My aunt was mad at my uncle and told him to tell Jim to never come back again. I didn't know at the time, but my uncle had a drug problem. I don't know what Mr. Jim or his accomplice were doing, or what they would have done if I wasn't on the phone with the police, but that grin was not a friendly one. It was sinister. And again, he also had to have known my uncle was not there because the basement was dark. He would have seen through the windowed basement door. He had also tried lifting the garage door, something not even my uncle did. He intended to break into the basement, that much is clear to me. There is no other explanation. I never babysat for them again, and I don't think I ever even went back up there because not long after my aunt divorced my uncle and moved out.
This happened to me when I was about 12 or 13 years old, so about 15 years ago. The town that I live in has developed a lot since the story, but when this happened, there were a lot of factories spread out with lots of land in between them. There was a Walmart being built in the area, but had barely started construction. There was a main highway that ran through there, but my mom didn't like taking it as the traffic would get really bad most of the time. The side streets we would take were desolate and not very well lit since barely any cars drove on them. I can't remember where we were coming from that night, but in the car was my mom, my brother, who was 3 years younger than me, and myself. My mom is obviously driving, and I'm in the passenger seat with my brother sitting behind me. My mom is the sweetest person ever, but is very adamant she will never stop to help somebody on the side of the road or pick somebody up, especially when her kids are in the car. She does, however, make sure she calls the police so that they can help. It was around 9 p.m. and we were going home when my mom and I spot somebody on the side of the road by the passenger side with their hood up. Nothing out of the ordinary, as my mom slows down a little since it's dark outside and doesn't want to harm anybody that might be fixing their car. As soon as we are close to the car, this guy steps out from around the hood towards the street and is waving us down. I don't remember much of a description because I wasn't paying too much attention, plus I could barely see him, but I do remember feeling bad we weren't at least going to stop and see what he needed. The man at this point is in the middle of the road waving his hands, but as we come up on the car, we don't see anybody else in the vehicle, so my mom swerves around him and tells my brother to find her phone and her purse that was on the floor between the front and back seats. I look at my mom as she looks in her rearview mirror and her face gets white and her eyes go wide. My mom slams her foot on the accelerator. This is highly unusual since she's really good at going at the speed limit. At this point, I know something's wrong. My mom's voice goes high and in a panicked voice is asking my brother where her phone is. I'm yelling at her, "What's going on?" All this chaos is freaking my brother out with him being so little. He's crying and can't find the phone. My mom keeps her eyes on the road, but keeps glancing up continuously at her rearview mirror and finally answers, "He's following us." I'm not exactly sure what she's talking about, but I know this isn't a good situation. My mom is speeding towards the highway, and thank goodness there's no traffic. I look in the back window and see somebody passing cars trying to keep up with us. I asked my mom where she's going, and she told me she's heading towards the police station. As soon as we are getting close, my mom tells me to jump out of the car as soon as she stops, and grab my brother from the back seat while she runs around the car to meet us. My mom stops right in front of the police station and doesn't even wait for the car to fully stop before she puts the car in park. I open my car door as fast as I can and grab my brother, who has quickly opened his door. I take off in a full sprint with my brother in one hand and my mom in the other. So once we finally talk to a police officer is when I fully understand the full extent of what happened. My mom told the police officer that once we had passed the guy with the broken down car, he quickly ran to the hood of his car and slammed it. He then got into his car and sped after us. That was when my mom knew this guy had horrible intentions. She said he kept trying to speed up to get on the side of us, but she was able to speed up to avoid that. Once my mom turned toward the police station, she said the guy had stopped following her, but still wanted to get to the police station in case he'd change his mind. She gave the best description of the guy and his car, but because everything happened so fast, she didn't get a license plate number. I'm pretty sure the police never found him. I'm also not sure what the guy had planned for us if we had actually stopped to help, but I know it was nothing good. To the guy that faked his car being broke down on an empty street, let's not ever meet again.
Last year, I was living by myself at the time, before my partner and I moved in together. For some background, my partner used to work very hectic shifts. Sometimes he finished at 5 p.m., sometimes 6 p.m., sometimes 9 p.m., and he would let me know if he'd be dropping by that day, though he usually wouldn't be able to give me a time, but I at least knew he'd be coming by. It was around 8 p.m., and I was upstairs in the bedroom working on an embroidery project. I had my AirPods in, so I wasn't too aware of what was going on around me. I remember feeling the bed rattle since my bedroom was right above the front door, so whenever someone closed the door, seeing as it was very old and heavy, it always rattled my bed frame. This would usually indicate that my partner had arrived. I didn't immediately go downstairs to greet him, as I really wanted to finish off the piece of embroidery I was working on. It was about 5 minutes before I took out my AirPods and proceeded to make my way out of my bedroom and onto the stair landing. I was about to call out for him when I realized that he didn't leave his work jacket or work boots in the entry. He knew full well I don't like shoes, especially work boots, all over my carpeted floors. I assume I must have imagined feeling the bed shake. I went back into my bedroom and I was about to put my AirPods back in when I very distinctly heard a big crash come from downstairs. It sounded like something very heavy was dropped. I freaked out and I called my boyfriend's name down from the bedroom's doorway. I got no reply, but I sure as hell started hearing heavy footsteps pacing towards the entryway. My gut feeling was that something here was very, very wrong. I turned and grabbed my phone from the bed and bolted to the bathroom, which was the only room in the house with a lock. I called the police as I started hearing those same heavy footsteps make their way up the stairs. I've never been scared of those creaking sounds coming from the stairs, but it was different then. At the time, it felt as if I've never heard a scarier sound. As I was on the phone to the police, the only thing that I could tell the lady on the phone was my address over and over again. I was more focused on how I was going to get out of there. I wasn't going to wait and see what would happen or who this person was, so I flung open my small bathroom window and feet first slid down onto the lower roof. My adrenaline was so high, I had to momentarily put my phone into my bra as I had no pockets and needed both of my hands. I just remember hearing the police dispatcher keep asking over and over if I'm okay and what had happened. I didn't even have the time to tell her what I was doing. It felt as though my body had gone on autopilot. Once on the bottom roof, I lowered myself again, now onto the pavement, as I fell right onto my knees, no less. I got right back up and bolted it down the street. It was completely dark with it being mid-October. The dispatcher was still on the phone when I finally got on again, and I told her whilst running that there was someone in my home and how I had just jumped out of the window to get away. I ran for what felt like forever until the lady on the phone said to focus on finding a shop where I could go into and wait for the police. I remembered my boyfriend and told the lady I needed to call him. I made it to a Tesco Express by then, and though she wanted to keep me on the phone, I said I needed to make sure my partner didn't go into my home and potentially risk running into the other person. I got into contact with my partner, who had just finished work. It was around 9 p.m., and was driving to my house. I told him what had happened, and he instead started heading towards the shop I was outside of. I felt such relief when he got there. I remember taking a picture of my scratched up knees when I got back into the car. For some reason, I got very fixated on them. My partner called the police back for me, as the shock started setting in then, and he let them know he was with me. It took some time before the police finally arrived at my home. I was told my front door was left wide open, and in the living room the side table had been knocked over. My home wasn't ransacked, but it did look as if someone booked it out of there relatively quickly. Upstairs, my bathroom door was kicked in so hard that the door frame itself was indented in, though nothing was stolen. Once they looked all over the place, I was called and told them I could return. A call-out ambulance crew was called, and they looked me over. They sorted out my knees and did some sort of assessment to see if I was okay mentally, and told me to go see my GP the next morning about my knees. Reports and statements were written up, and I stayed with my boyfriend for 2 weeks after that. I had to hire someone to fix my door frame along with having a security system installed, as I didn't think I'd be able to return it. They never found out who this man was. My neighbors had cameras, and we all ever figured out about this person that he was a man who just walked right into my home like it was his. Zero hesitation. My front door was unlocked, as I was expecting my partner to arrive soon. I live in a very safe village, and leaving the door unlocked was a common occurrence, though I've never left it unlocked since. I still live here with my partner and 2 dogs now. The man has never been back, though we still have quite obvious cameras around the property, along with visible security company signage. This was easily the most terrifying experience I've had in my life. It's so hard to describe, to tell to people. It's like I wasn't even in control of my own body when this was happening. Autopilot went on, and all I knew was I needed to get out of there.